Well, first of all, thank you ever so much for inviting me to come and speak to you today. And really, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I suppose, my journey and evolution into blind cricket and how that really transformed my existence at about the age of 20. I'm a local lad. I grew up in Hove, went to school in Hove, was an absolute sporting fanatic through, really, from as soon as I could walk, I'd be kicking a football, and did so up until about the age of 20, when I'd gone off to the university in Birmingham to study. I was still kicking a football more than I was probably studying at that time, but the intentions were honourable, I promise. And I developed a rare eye condition called Leber's optic neuropathy, which was a genetic condition that obviously had been passed through the family, but nobody else in the family had ever developed it. So it was a complete and utter shock when I did develop it. The onset of it was in late March 1999, and on the 11th of May in 1999 I was registered blind. And it was a very quick process. I went from being able to drive to representing the university football team and chasing a lot of girls around at university, to finding all three of those things suddenly far more challenging and impossible to do in the same way that I'd done them before. And it came as a great shock to me. I could no longer drive, and to me it actually wasn't the end of the world. It was disappointing. I had to leave my course at university to really try and take stock of what I was going to do. And again, it was disappointing, but it wasn't earth-shattering. I enjoyed my course, but it wasn't the be-all and end-all of what my life was about. But not being able to play football again in my mind was something that was earth-shattering to me. I'd played locally, I'd played at a reasonable standard, and I'd played nearly every day while I was growing up in my teenage years, whether it be at the park, whether it be at a club, whether it be at the school team. It was my life. And all of a sudden, the thing that broke my heart was reflecting that I'd never play football again. At that stage, that was the perception that I took to my visual impairment and the impact it was going to have on my life. I knew of disability sports, but at that stage, I wasn't really ready to see them as something that I wanted to take part in. I didn't think I'd be able to play at a competitive level that I had done whilst growing up, and therefore they weren't for me. I was very fortunate when my eyes were deteriorating to come across a local charity here in Brighton and Hove called the Blatchington Court Trust, and I met some incredibly positive ladies who were both totally blind, and showed that actually, despite developing a visual impairment, there was also still an awful lot that you could achieve. So I had to retrain. I learned how to use a computer that would talk to me rather than me see the screen, and learnt to touch type. I decided to get back into education to try and work out what I'd be able to do and not do, and took an A-level in psychology at Brighton College of Technology, as it used to be, City College I think as it is now. And I loved it. I loved psychology. I loved getting back into studying, and I realised that actually I wanted to get back into university and continue. All of this time, I wasn't exercising, I wasn't being active, but my life was sort of getting back on track in an educational way. And I managed to get onto a place at university, and I went to Sussex. I decided to remain in Brighton, a place that I knew and loved and could get to all my favourite pubs by memory from before, so it was very key and important to me. And so I studied at the University of Sussex and did a degree in social policy. It was during my third year at Sussex, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do beyond that time, that I got a letter through the post from Sussex County Cricket Club saying that they were setting up a blind cricket team and they were looking for players. I put it on my bedroom floor along with everything else that was in my bedroom rather than where it probably should be, and thought, I don't know whether I want to do this. I gave it some consideration for a few weeks, and then a couple of days before the first sort of practice match was due to take place, I thought, I've got to give this a go. If I don't give it a go, I'll never know. And so I did. I've got a couple of balls, which I'll show you, and I knew very little about the game before I decided to go and give it a go. And so I'd played cricket when I was fully sighted, and so I didn't have any of that kit anymore because it was a long time since I'd played. But I borrowed my friend's kit, so I had the full leg pads, the helmet, the chest guard, the gloves, the absolutely everything, thinking, I've no idea, but we'll give it a go. And turned up to find out that we played with a size 3 football with some noisemakers in it, and the necessity for all that protective equipment wasn't quite as necessary as I thought it might be. But I gave it a go. We played at Arundel. We were incredibly well welcomed out there. And making the decision to go and give it a go suddenly transformed my life, really to that extent. I played, I loved it. I'd played cricket before, and it helped because I was quite good at it. And I managed to bat quite well, to bowl quite well, and I met some other people who were blind and visually impaired who were just desperate to play sport. I played in 2 games with this ball, which is what we use in this country to play blind cricket with. And after the second game, I was invited to go to an England blind training weekend, which is played with this ball, hence bringing another one along. And again, it was another moment that sort of changed my life. I went to the England training weekend, and following that training weekend, there was a 5-match series taking place against Pakistan up near Reading at a school called Bradfield. I didn't take part in it, but I was able to stay and watch it. And I watched some of the most competitive sport I'd ever seen in my life, and let alone been involved in. And it made me think that my attitude I'd taken to disability sport was a crap one. Excuse my language, but it was a pretty rubbish one. And I shouldn't have had that attitude, but I did. But I saw this, and I met people who were just as competitive as anybody else. And why wouldn't you be? And it made me think, I want more of this. I started training with the England blind cricket team and was keen to work out how I might be able to get into that team. And for coming up in the not too distant future was a blind cricket World Cup in India. I started training, and it was very fortunate for me, but somebody unfortunately had to drop out. It was for positive reasons. Their wife had fallen pregnant, and I think, as our last speaker mentioned, you need a great woman in your life, and that lady clearly pulled the strings because he could no longer go and play in the World Cup, which left a slot available, which I was asked to fulfill those duties and go to a blind cricket World Cup in India. I trained and trained and trained to try and ensure that if I went, I'd be part of a team and not just part of a squad. And for those of you who've been to university and also worked, you have far more time when you're at university to do things like training than you do when you end up starting to work. So I still had time to train incredibly hard. And when I got to India, I was fortunate enough to play in every single game that we played in. And unfortunately, we lost in the semi-final against Pakistan, who went on to win it. But again, it was a profound experience. And in India, as part of an England cricket team, albeit a blind cricket team, we were treated like heroes, signing autographs, because to the young people in India, they didn't give them monkeys if you were blind. You were an international cricketer. And so signing autographs, we did at sort of plenty. And it was an amazing experience, and just a boost of confidence, self-esteem, and really an inspiring drive to continue playing sport. What it also gave me, and leading on to how I won a Pride of Britain award, I'll pop these down, was really that experience of suddenly blind sport making it accessible. We were asked to go and do some development work in the Caribbean, a particularly challenging place to go and do some development work, but we were asked to set up blind cricket in Barbados. a country that played cricket, but didn't play blind cricket, and their expectations and limitations in terms of young people with a disability, and in this case, people who are blind and visually impaired, their expectations were that they could weave baskets and make belts and do no more than that. And we went across with the England team and showed that actually their aspirations could be much different, that they could achieve, they could play sport, and they could interact with society like anybody else. And since that visit to the Caribbean, the West Indies now have a national blind cricket team, and they've taken part in the last 3 Blind Cricket World Cups, transforming really the lives of some blind and visually impaired people across the islands, but also raising the aspirations of all of those islands as to what people with a disability can achieve. It made me think, coming out of university, what on earth was I going to do? I wasn't really sure anyway, but the sport element had made me think, hang on, if I was as visually impaired as I am now, when I was going through my mainstream education, school would have been rubbish. I lived to get up and go and play football in the playground before school, to play at lunchtime, and to play in the school team after school. It made school bearable. And with my visual impairment, I just don't think my educational years would have been as enjoyable. And so I set up a project down here called Sport for Choice, which was for blind and visually impaired young people, and created sporting opportunities during the school holiday times, and for those young people to try any sports that able-bodied people would take for granted. And I ran that for about 7 or 8 years, whilst also working at the Change Foundation that formerly used to be called Cricket for Change. So I had a very strong focus around using cricket as a tool for development. It was one of the young people who I got involved with the junior Sussex visually impaired side, called Danielle Garrett, and who had attended Sport for Choice for 5 years, who nominated me for my Pride of Britain award. It was basically an incredible, lovely experience that I had. I was contacted by Meridian one afternoon to say they'd like to come and film a blind cricket session that we were doing, and that I'd been nominated for an award. And I had no idea what the Pride of Britain Awards were, and this lady came down and took some film and said, "Can you tell me what it would mean to you to win this award?" And so I said it would be an absolutely fantastic thing to win this award, but I wasn't quite sure what it was at the time. So anyhow, I was very fortunate and was sort of won a vote locally to get put forward to the national awards, which took place up in London. And on the night, it's the award that I won was the only award that's sort of not revealed until on the night itself. And we were very fortunate to enjoy a trip to Downing Street. Unfortunately, Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister at the time, so he's not one that's gone down in history as one of the most interesting, but I still feel very fortunate for meeting him. Yeah, we had a trip to Downing Street, and on the night, I was announced as the winner and got presented with this Pride of Britain award. But it was a fantastic achievement. I was absolutely chuffed to bits, but it was really more important to me that actually Danielle had felt empowered to nominate and had recognised the opportunities that she'd had to meet other young people, to build her confidence and her self-esteem, and to take part in lots of sporting opportunities that she may not have done had we not sort of set up the Sport for Choice project and run the Sussex Sharks visually impaired cricket team. So my experiences are still very much significantly in cricket with disability sport. I gave up the captaincy of the Sussex Sharks blind cricket team last year, as I now have 2 little daughters who take a bit more of my time than the cricket team are allowed to take now. So I've relinquished that responsibility, still play when I can, and as mentioned, I now work for the Change Foundation, who were formerly known as Cricket for Change, and we use sport and most recently dance to really empower and develop the lives of marginalised young people, whether with a disability, some on the fringes of getting involved with crime, some already in young offending institutes, And we do that in London. We've worked across the country, and we work across the world as well. And our work in Barbados just about 10 years ago, working with blind and visually impaired young people, was the real kickstart to that international development work. And I feel very, very fortunate to work for the Change Foundation. From the moment I started, my visual impairment has not been a limitation as to what I can achieve within the organisation. I report into our trustees, and I oversee projects that work with young people with a disability as much as I work with people who don't have a disability. And although they support me with my disability, it is in no way a limitation to what we can achieve. And I feel incredibly proud that we can run an organisation in the same way. And we have over 50% of our staff have a disability, of a workforce of 18, which again just hopefully reflects a culture that if you do have a disability, it doesn't matter. You can strive to achieve whatever you want to achieve, and supported and with the right confidence, you can achieve anything you like. And so, from my visual impairment, from finding blind cricket, and from working with some amazing young people, I've had the benefit of travelling the world, developing projects, and doing far more since having developed a visual impairment that could have been so negative than I think I would have done had I pursued my estate management career in Birmingham, struggling to find the pubs I can find so easily in Brighton. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, to present to you, and thank you very much.